This is the Goldflower Trampoline Sprinkler for kids. It comes with the hose. The hose has holes in it to allow the water to spray out. It also comes with a couple of attachments depending on what kind of hose you'll be attaching to it. And it comes with a lot of zip ties in 2 different lengths. So first things first, you're going to want to lay this out and kind of figure out which side the holes are on and make sure you know where it goes. It says you can control the water pressure with it. It's really just an on-off valve. So the water pressure itself is, if you don't want it to be full force, you just turn it halfway. So my idea was to run the hose down the outside of the trampoline so it would be easier to connect the garden hose to it, so we wouldn't have to climb up on the trampoline in order to connect it way up top above the net. But pro tip, don't do that. And I'll show you here in a minute why you don't want to do that. Biggest negative about the product is that it comes with zip ties in order to connect the hose. Because you have zip ties, it's really easy to tighten them too tight. There's not really a whole lot of guidance for that. So you can put the zip ties every so often. You can spread them out. I had some issues with how I spread out the zip ties, which I think might just be user error. I don't necessarily knock the product for it, but the fact that it has zip ties and I'm putting it on a trampoline and we live in an area with winter means that I have to take my trampoline down every season, put it up every season. Because there's zip ties, I'm going to have to cut the zip ties every season before we take down the trampoline, and next season I'm going to have to put the thing back up and put new zip ties on it. Thankfully, they did provide plenty of zip ties, so I think I have enough to be able to use this for a few seasons, not even digging into my own stash of zip ties, just with the zip ties that they sent me. So this is how I hooked up the hose down below the trampoline. I used a zip tie to connect it. You'll see I have one valve, and then I'm slowly turning on the valve for the hose. And immediately had to jump back because it started spraying everywhere. Now you'll see that this hose that I ran up has holes on the side of it, so it's kind of spraying out into the yard. That was fine. I didn't really think there would be a problem with that, but I immediately noticed an issue that there was a lot of leakage coming from the hose, and only about the first section of the hose in the zip ties was actually spraying any water. So at this point, I had to go back to the drawing board and figure out what was going on and maybe find a better system. So after looking at the hose, where it connected to the garden hose, I realized that the black plastic popped right out of where it connects. Now, thankfully, there's this little orange valve that you can unscrew, slide the black connector back in tightly, rescrew it back on to make that seal a little tighter. But I realized that how I had it hooked up, it was creating some pressure on the hose, which allowed it to become loose and slip out. So regrettably, this means that my idea of having the hose in a easy to reach spot on the trampoline was not going to work, and I had to move it up to the top of the net. The other thing that this method of installation, running the hose down the side, did is at the top of the net, I ended up with a hard kink in the hose that I couldn't quite maneuver. So before you think that this is a good idea, let me tell you it's not. Just put the hose connector at the top of the trampoline. It's going to take a lot of that pressure off of the hose. It's going to take a lot of the pressure off. You're not going to kink it as much. So it's definitely worth just biting the bullet and putting it at the top of your trampoline net to begin with. So I had to rearrange where the hose was sitting, and I tried to keep the hose not as tight in the zip ties, but at the very end I tied that zip tie tighter because I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to move anywhere. In hindsight, I think I did this a little too tight. As I turned it back on, only half of the thing was really spraying. I tried to readjust the hose and it just wasn't quite working as I expected it would. So I learned a lot from the installation of this product. First is it's really difficult to tie up a hose with zip ties before you start running water through it. And it's also very difficult trying to tie up a hose with zip ties that has water spraying in your face. I will recommend turn on the water first and then turn the water pressure on maybe low, just enough so the hose kind of starts to expand. So that way you can work the hose around the outside and use a lot more zip ties than I did. Because I only used a few zip ties, it was putting too much pressure on the hose and it really ended up kinking it, so I wasn't getting the water to go all the way around. Another thing I noticed is this hose put a lot of weight on the net of the trampoline. So as soon as the water would start going through it, I noticed the trampoline net kind of start to sag and get weighed down. I was going to go back and redo all my zip ties all the way around, space them out a little more, but I was worried about the weight that the hose was putting on the trampoline whenever water would run through it. I essentially ended up just maneuvering the hose enough and leaving it where it was, where only about half of the hose is really spraying onto the trampoline. So only the half that's right after the hose is spraying down onto the trampoline, and with our trampoline, it's plenty of coverage, and the kids are going to be fine with that. And the other good thing about this is it kind of gives a safe zone on the trampoline where you can move to the other side of the trampoline and not be getting water sprayed on you, just in case it's a little too cold or they need to get out. They don't have to climb off the trampoline. In an ideal situation, this would be spraying from every single angle, and I would have done it correctly. I probably would have tried to get water running through the hose before I put on the zip ties. And after redoing it a couple times, I figured this is probably good enough. We'll see if I adjust it a little later. As I was installing this, I realized that there are a lot other use cases for this hose. Now, I do want to mention that the hose that I'm using, the garden hose I'm using in this video, is the Etmery expandable garden hose. I have another video on that, so make sure you check that out if you're interested at all in expandable garden hoses. One of the things I love about the Etmery expandable garden hose is it's really in a small package, easy to carry, so you don't have a ton of weight. It's easy to maneuver, and it shrinks down after you're done using it. It also has a little valve on the end of the hose so you can shut off the water. It's nice because you have two valves, so you can have one on the trampoline sprinkler and you have one on the hose, so you can turn on the hose and then slowly turn on the trampoline sprinkler. If you don't have an expandable garden hose or you've never used one, I highly recommend them. It's really nice to have a garden hose that is in a small package that expands up to be 50, 75 feet, and you're not carrying around a giant hose with you. Now back to the trampoline sprinkler. I think there are a few other use cases for this, especially if this product ends up lasting multiple seasons. I could see maybe not putting it on the trampoline, but maybe putting it around on the swing set. So you have water spraying down as they're swinging. And so when they're swinging, they have kind of a cascading waterfall going down on them as they swing. I think that would be a really cool thing. The other thing you could potentially do, maybe you don't have kids and you don't see a use case for this product, you could use this as a watering line for your plants. Because there's a couple of holes on the hose every so often, if you had maybe a really long garden bed, you could lay this hose down, even maybe put some stakes over top of it to keep it in place, turn it on, and you're going to have a couple of water sprays. This might be a really good option because you can also tweak the amount of pressure and make sure that the water is shooting up and over. It's not full bore just blasting at your plants and washing away any dirt you might have beneath the plants or around them. I hope this was helpful. The instruction manual that comes with it really doesn't tell you a whole lot. It just kind of tells you to lay it down and then use the zip ties and go at it. The Amazon product listing actually tells you more about the product than the instruction manual that comes with it. So if you have questions, look at the Amazon product listing and you're going to find a bit more information. Just go slow as you're installing it, add a few more zip ties, make sure that you're not stretching them out as much as I did, especially if you want it to go all the way around the trampoline. You're probably going to want to install this while you have water running through it, which means you're going to get a little wet. The other thing you can do is try installing it from the back and kind of getting it started and then work behind it so it's spraying out, but you're going to get wet while you're installing this. There's just not really a good way around that if you want to have a good installation. I hope you found this video helpful. Hopefully it was informative. I do think you could get a lot of great use out of this product. I'm definitely looking forward to using it this summer, and I'm sure my kids are as well. Thank you for watching.